Hello, brothers and sisters. Today we're going to talk about conflict resolution and the path to peace and cooperation. If we look at our world today, of course, it's full of conflict, it's full of struggle, and people want to bring peace. They want to cooperate with others, but they seem to be unable to do it. So, what is the UPF perspective on this? And how can we implement it in the world? How can we really bring peace, which is, of course, the desire of all humankind? Everyone wants it, but we seem to be unable to get it now with the great conflicts in the world, in Sudan, in Gaza, in Ukraine, in Myanmar. People aren't able to bring the peace they all want. And this has also been true historically. In history, there's been so many wars, so many conflicts, so much division and hatred and animosity. So we have to find a solution to this. And of course, we have to do it. Humans have to do it. God will help us and guide us and inspire us, but God can't do it for us. So we have to recognize the value of religion. Religion has been extremely important in history in giving people a right perspective on life, a right understanding of relationships among human beings, and a right relationship with the Creator. So true religious practice seeks to restore the original ideal of peace. This is really something very, very important. So true religion practices humility in front of God. We shouldn't be arrogant or proud or think we know everything. In fact, compared to all the knowledge of God and the knowledge of the universe, we know very, very little. So humility in front of God is very important. Respect for our parents is also emphasized by religion. Fidelity in marriage, loyalty, commitment, all of these things are very, very important, stressed by religion. Public service, to have a view of life which encompasses the bigger picture, the whole picture, the public purpose, and also personal discipline to control ourselves, to direct our thoughts, our energies, to sacrifice ourselves and not be dominated by our instinctual physical desires. Not that they're wrong, but physical desires are good, but they have to be directed and controlled. And religion can give us the power and the means to do this. So religion is extremely important historically in bringing civilization and progress for human beings and better relationships. In fact, all the major cultures have developed and grown based on religion. So we also learn restraint, we learn to be patient, we learn to forgive others in our relationships. All of these things are very, very crucial. Also, the golden rule, which we've talked about already in our previous presentations: love others as you love yourself. If people all over the world could just practice this sincerely and honestly, the world could change very, very quickly. So we should love our neighbors. That's to say, the people around us, and even the scriptures teach us we should love our enemies, or at least we shouldn't hate them. That's the first step, not to hate them. So love of enemies even. So religion is a restorative vehicle then to bring humanity to a higher state of consciousness and enable us to live more in accordance with the original love and bring the peace we want to bring. So we're going to talk about next the human condition and the struggle within. This is very, very important to understand, that we struggle greatly with two poles of existence, really. On one hand, we do want to get back to God. We do value the truth. We do value true love or God's word. And we have a part of us that's objective to this, that wants to relate to this. But on the other hand, we can have within ourselves the opposite. We can have an evil mind or a self-centered mind that wants to live entirely for ourselves and pursue our own desires, irrespective of what is true or good or proper or godly. And we can be controlled by evil spiritual forces. And this is contradiction. We have this inward contradiction, and this is something all mankind suffers from. And it is a great problem that we have to solve, because obviously to have peace outwardly, we have to start with peace inwardly. So I've got some interesting quotations from this book, The World Scriptures. It's a very enlightening book, and it's a comparative anthology of sacred texts. And it explains how all the great religions have a lot of commonality. A lot of the moral and ethical themes are very, very similar. So I'd like to read a few quotes from this book, which shows this situation of contradiction within that we all suffer from and we all have to deal with. Here's a quote from Hinduism, from the Mahabharata. I know what is good, but I am not inclined to do it. I know also what is bad, but I do not refrain from doing it. So contradiction within, knowing what's good but not doing it, knowing what's bad and not refraining from it. And it's a very important quote here from St. Paul from Christianity. I do not understand my own actions, for I do not do what I want, but I do the very thing I hate. Now, if I do not do what I want, I agree that the law is good. So then it is no longer I that do it, but sin which dwells within me. For I know that nothing good dwells within me, that is in my flesh, or in other words, in the physical body. I can will what is right, but I cannot do it. For I do not do the good I want, but the evil I do not want is what I do. Now, if I do what I do not want, it is no longer I that do it, but sin that dwells within me. So I find it to be a law that when I want to do right, evil lies close at hand. For I delight in the law of God in my innermost self, but I see in my members, that's to say in the body, another law at war with the law of my mind, making me captive to the law of sin, which dwells in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from this body of death? So St. Paul was, of course, the greatest, or one of the greatest of the early Christian missionaries, and he's honestly confessing of the inner struggle between good and evil within himself. And here's one from Judaism, from the Talmud. Rabbi Isaac said, man's evil inclination renews itself daily against him. As it is said, every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil every day. And Rabbi Simon ben Levi said, man's evil inclinations gather strength against him daily and seeks to slay him. And were not the Holy One, blessed be he, to help him, he could not prevail against it. So there are many quotes from many religions which indicate this situation of struggle within, contradiction, and we're all dealing with this, really. We have to solve this inner problem. The inner problem, the tendency to do evil, and the struggle where our conscience repels evil and we want to relate to God, and then the selfish mind which works against it. So, as we've said, we have to deal with this inner contradiction that we have, all human beings have, unfortunately. On one hand, we could live a very self-indulgent, greedy, lustful, lazy life. We can sacrifice others for our own sake, which people often have done and do, using other people for their own advantage. Or we could live a more religious or spiritual life. We could live a life of denying our own self-centered desires. Often religions advocate fasting, sexual abstinence, sacrificing myself or others even to live for the sake of others. So we have this struggle, and we have to solve this, and we have to deal and understand that there are evil spiritual forces that need to be dealt with. So again, reading from the world scriptures, I'd like to read some of the quotes about that. So people understand, or religions have always understood, there is this struggle between evil and good in history and in the spirit world. And the devil is known by various names: Satan, Christianity or Judaism, Iblis in Islam, and Mara in Buddhism. But this original evil being, or the source of evil thoughts, selfish lifestyles, and self-centeredness is this being. Angra Mainyu in Zoroastrianism. So many religions have understood there is evil spiritual forces, and we somehow are caught up in the middle in this struggle between good and evil in the spiritual dimension. And I'll read a few quotes which illustrate this from the world scriptures. One from Christianity, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. For we are not contending against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against the powers, against the rulers of this present age, against the spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places, or in the spiritual dimension. So that's a clear understanding that our struggle is not just a physical thing, but it's also a spiritual thing. And here's a quote from Jesus from John's Gospel, chapter 8. Jesus said to them, why do you not understand what I say? Because you cannot hear my word. Because you cannot bear my word, rather. You are of your father the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and has nothing to do with the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he lies, it is according to his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. But because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. So this indicates there's spiritual forces and energies that are directly against the truth, or against human beings ever fulfilling their great potential to be noble, true, and wonderful beings. And here's a quote from Buddhism here. Mara, the evil one, will expound to the bodhisattva a counterfeit of the path. The bodhisattva is a saint in Buddhism. So the truth doesn't always come to us easily. Sometimes we have to face a false truth as well, counterfeit, or Satan or the evil spiritual forces try to lead us astray with falsity. So there are many quotes about that as well. There's the struggle within, and then the evil spiritual forces we have to deal with and contend with, which can give us doubts, fears, depressions, all sorts of things can happen because of that. So religion is to strengthen our mind, really, to strengthen our spirit, to give us clarity of mind and spirit, and help us to direct our instinctual desires in the right channels, and not just live a life of self-centeredness. So oftentimes people will say, well, if there's a good God out there, why doesn't he do something for the world? Why doesn't he save us all? Why doesn't he get us out of this situation? But the truth is, God has done everything already. God gave us this incredible world with all the beauty, the trees, the flowers, the rivers, the mountains, everything we need to survive: air to breathe, water to drink, to bathe in, to use, to irrigate the fields and the lands. Everything is created, and it's a fantastic and a wonderful world that we exist in. And God has created the galaxies and the solar systems and all the wonderful heavens and the earth. So God has actually given us a great deal, but in the case of human beings, he gave us absolute free will as well. Because originally God's desire was to have a relationship with us based on love, not based on fear or compulsion or force, but based on love. So we have absolute free will, and God never interferes with that. God will try to guide us, as a parent does, and show us the way, but we actually have to use our wisdom. We have to practice the truth ourselves to fulfill our part, which compared to God's part is very small, perhaps 3%, but it does require our effort. So why is the world polluted and messed up and full of all sorts of problems? It's not because of God. It's actually because humans have failed their responsibility. We failed to use our freedom as wisely as we should. So God's will, therefore, has not been fulfilled in history because of this point. Free will goes with the responsibility to act upon the truth we know to be true, to follow our conscience. Now that's the human responsibility. So the fulfillment of God's will comes when both these aspects are there, that God's part is played and humans play their part as well and respond to God correctly. As I say, 100% effort. We have to make the effort to live correctly according to the truth and practice the right way of life. And then the purpose of existence is fulfilled. Freedom. We have to create ourselves in many respects. We have to perfect our own character and nature by our own efforts. So there's this process we call indemnity. It's to atone for, to make up for, to bring us back to the original situation. So all religions, they talk about humanity as having deviated from God at some point. So we've done many evil and sinful things as we've lived, and we've created a world we can call not the original world, but the fallen world, or we've come into a fallen position. That's why Jesus could say things like, "You are of your father the devil." In other words, we don't really resemble God, the heavenly parent, but we resemble something else, which is a lot less pleasant. And our actions have manifested sin and ugliness and conflict instead of goodness. So to indemnify this, to atone for this, we have to go in a direction which is the opposite to that which we've fallen into. And this is a historical process as well as an individual process. So this works this way. If we become a dishonest person by lying and cheating and stealing, we have to reverse that. We have to purify ourselves, purify our spirit by living a different way. So we don't lie anymore. We live honestly. We don't exploit others, and we can become an honest person again. We have to restore and purify our spirit. If we've lived an immoral life, we have to solve that problem by living a pure and holy life and coming back to the point where we fell from. So this is the point of religion as well. It always advocates repentance and renewal, or rebirth and beginning again. And because God is the ultimate parent, that's what he wants us to do. As human parents, if our children do wrong and then they come and apologize and say, "Sorry, Dad," or "Sorry, Mum, I really didn't do that well. I messed up completely. I ruined things." We always say, "Don't worry, start again. Do something better in the future." And that's how it is with us and with God. We have to indemnify or restore our lost positions. So let's talk about this, restoration by faith and love. So the first thing is to find God again as a reality in our lives and find the truth of God again. What is really true about life? Why am I here? Where am I going? What am I doing here? What's my purpose? Where did I come from? Where am I going to go after I depart this physical existence? So we have to discover the truth, and this is the purpose of religion. And religions do this, as I've said already. There's a great deal of commonality in the ethics and the morals of all the great religions. And they teach us again God's word, how to act, how to live, how to behave, what to do. So that's the first thing, is to love God and have faith in God's words. And then after that, we have to practice love. We have to actually embody the word, and we have to put it into action around us with the people we know and the people we work with. So as we look in the Bible again, the Bible tells us we have to love our neighbour as ourselves. So if we practice that, we embody the truth, our inner self or our spirit will grow and develop and be in a much better condition. So that's the two things we have to bear in mind. First of all, believe in God, have loyalty and love towards God, find out what God's truth is and the purpose and meaning of our existence, and then practice our love as we go through our life. So faith is very powerful, and this gives us a correct basis for life. Vertical foundation for horizontal relationships. Vertical foundation means our relationship with God, with the spirit world, and horizontal relationships means the relationships with the people around us in our own physical dimension. So we have to become linked to the center of true love. This is the point. We're advocated to seek a living relationship with God. The Bible tells us we should love God with all our heart, mind, and soul. But actually, if we were required to love God and worship God, and God didn't reciprocate, God would be a tyrant. So God loves like this already. God lives for the sake of others and loves humanity passionately and intensely. So we have to link to that. We have to find our own God consciousness, if you like. And many of these Eastern religions teach this. You have to become a God conscious person. So we have to change from a self-centered view of life where everything revolves about me, my needs, my desires, and we have to have a more cosmic-centered point of view, or a God-centered point of view. We have to do this. This is very important, and faith can enable us to do that. And it also gives us power too. We can overcome persecution if we're linked to the source of our being, which is, of course, God and God's love. There's a very interesting story in the Bible which gives us the model, really, a model of restorative love. And it's a story of Jacob and Esau. If you look in the Old Testament, around about 3,500 years ago or 4,000 years ago, we can see the story of Jacob and Esau. We see they lived in the land of Canaan, and their father gave the blessing that was normally reserved for the firstborn son, which was Esau, to the second son, Jacob. And because of this, Esau became very angry, resentful, and hateful towards his brother, and in fact wanted to kill him. And we see that Jacob was advised to flee away from home by his mother, and he went to the land of Haran, which is around about where Syria is today. And he stayed there with his uncle, whose name was Laban. And he went through a difficult time there. He went through all sorts of circumstances, working for his uncle. His uncle cheated him many times and changed his wages many times. His uncle cheated him over the manner of the daughter that he should marry. So all sorts of things came to Jacob that were not particularly pleasant, but he kept his faith, he kept his loyalty to God, he kept his integrity. And then finally, after 21 years of going through this suffering course, God advised him and asked him to go back to the land of Canaan. So on the way back, his brother heard that he was coming home, Esau, and it tells us in the Bible that he set out to meet his brother with 400 men, all armed to the teeth. So this wasn't really a welcoming party, it was something else. And then as the two brothers approached one another, we see that Jacob sent ahead of him all sorts of presents: cattle, goats, sheep, all the things he had won by hard labor in the land of Haran, he gave to his brother. And each group of animals was accompanied by a servant as they went ahead in groups. And the servant would bow down to Esau and say, "These are a present from your servant Jacob." And then finally, when the two brothers were meeting together for the first time for 21 years, Jacob bowed down to his brother and said, "Esau, seeing you is like seeing the face of God." And Esau ran forward, and instead of taking out his sword and killing his brother, he actually embraced him and said, "I'm so happy that you've come home. I'm so glad to see you." So this is a great lesson for us, how to conquer enmity and how to conquer the situation where there is this desire to kill, this desire for revenge, this desire to hate. All of these things can be conquered by love. So that is the pattern that we have to follow in our life. We have to conquer with love. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. And if we practice it, we can be successful. Sometimes it looks like we're not going to succeed, but in history, people have tried force, violence, coercion, all sorts of ways to control people, but it never works in the long term. There's always anger, resentment, and people holding grudges, as Esau did. But Esau was won over with love, and we have to practice that same way to bring peace, to bring real peace. So looking at this, does fighting resolve conflict? Of course, it's sometimes necessary to defend ourselves. That isn't evil. We shouldn't be, that isn't a bad thing. We shouldn't be passive if somebody brutally attacks our family or our country. We have to defend ourselves. We have to defend the weak. Those things are good, but we shouldn't engage in aggression, acts of violence against others randomly or without reason. And we have to always recognize that even if we do have to fight, it doesn't resolve conflict. Defeating an enemy doesn't answer his grievances nor end his hatred. And always the defeated are inclined to seek revenge again. Everything can come out again in the next generation. And resentments and hatreds and conflict can go on for centuries, as we've seen in human history. And this is because people don't really know the way of love, which is the way that all the scriptures advocate. So here's an interesting quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "We never get rid of an enemy by meeting hate with hate. We get rid of an enemy by getting rid of enmity." Or in other words, this concept that someone is your enemy, we have to do away with that. We can't look at anyone as an enemy, even people that are acting in an antagonistic way. We just have to think they're in a process of growth. They haven't quite matured enough yet, and they will eventually. We have to love them and encourage them to do better. And here's another quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "Throw us into jail and we shall still love you. Beat us and leave us half dead and we will still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer. One day we shall win freedom, but not only for ourselves, we shall so appeal to your heart and conscience that we shall win you in the process, and our victory will be a double victory." In other words, the oppressor is won over by love, and therefore they are also liberated from anger, hatred, resentment, and all the things that are in their hearts. So love is the most powerful thing. And again, a quote from Gandhi, who fought for the independence of India from the British, is saying here in this quotation, "By a long course of prayerful discipline, I have ceased for over 40 years to hate anybody, but I can and do hate evil wherever it exists. I hate the system of government that the British people have set up in India. I hate from the bottom of my heart the hideous system of untouchability, which is the caste system in India. And further, we can only win over the opponent by love, never by hate. Hate is the subtlest form of violence. If I am a follower of ahimsa, that's to say the way of non-violence, I must love my enemy." Very important quotations. And again, further from Gandhi, "Having flung aside the sword, there is nothing except the cup of love, which I can offer to those who oppose me. It is by offering that cup that I expect to draw them close to me. Love is the strongest force in the world, the strongest force the world possesses, and yet it is the humblest imaginable." So, very important point there. Love is the strongest force in the world. People don't always understand that, but it is the force that can change the world if we practice it rightly. And here's a quote from Father Moon of the Universal Peace Federation. There's a picture there that shows Father Moon in the concentration camp. In North Korea, there were many concentration camps after the Second World War because it became a communist regime, and their way of getting rid of political opponents or people they considered undesirable was not to kill them outright. There would have been too much public protest. So the policy was to send them to a labor camp, and they would gradually die of hunger and starvation. They would be worked to death, in fact. Father Moon said in that place, people would usually die within 6 months. And if somebody died while eating their meager daily rations, people would struggle to get the rice out of their mouths to feed themselves a little bit more. So we can understand the desperation and horror of those sorts of situations. Yet many years later, in 1990, Father Moon went to North Korea again for the first time since leaving there many, many years before. And he embraced the leader of North Korea as a brother. And so this was the same pattern as we saw in Jacob and Esau, reconciliation by loving the enemy. And here's a quote from Father Moon here. The reason God does not punish, even though he may see an enemy, is that he is thinking of the enemy's parents, wife and children, who all love him. When you really understand such a heart of God, could you take revenge on your enemy? So God has been loving all sorts of people. God loves the good and the bad. God, as it says in the Bible, sends the rain on the just and the unjust. So God has always tried to reach out with love to the world. And this is really what Father Moon is saying here. When you know all these things, you would even go and help that person. He was saying you would help the person that's against you. In this manner, one comes closer to the great way of heavenly principle, the great way which tries to embrace everything centered on love. When that happens, the earth will shake and induce even God to tears. So the quickest way to bring peace on earth is practice true love. And if we do, God will say, you truly resemble me. How happy I am. This is how we should understand the teaching to love one's enemy. The source of such power to love your enemy is neither knowledge, nor money, nor earthly power. So very, very important, really. To bring peace on earth, we have to practice these essential principles. And these pictures here again illustrate the work of the Universal Peace Federation in bringing Christians, Jews and Muslims together as brothers in the Holy Land, in Israel. When I went there, I was very moved to see this. Jews and Christians embracing one another as brothers and treating one another kindly with care and consideration. And so this message, if people really had applied it in the land of Israel, they wouldn't be fighting today. That's for sure. So a great message, and the path to peace is and the path to end conflict, we have to end the conflict firstly within ourselves. This struggle, this contradiction that all the religions understand, the struggle between good and evil forces within us and around us, we have to overcome that and live a disciplined life of love and service. And then we have to practice this love towards others. So that's the first step. The first step is, you could say, a step for the individual to take, their own personal growth and development and control of the physical body through love and through discipline. And then to live correctly with others by practicing a life of love and service and care for others. This is the essential path to peace and the path to end conflict. It can't be done by diplomacy or economic power. None of those things are effective. If we take love out of the equation, we should never be able to bring peace on earth. So to reiterate then the Universal Peace Federation founding principles, we are one human family created by God, the ultimate reality. And the way to reconcile the divided human family is to live for the sake of others. This is the law of the universe. This is what God does. God lives entirely for the sake of others, for the sake of humanity, for the sake of the whole universe. God gives his energy, his power, constantly and endlessly to maintain the universe. God gives his love endlessly and unconditionally for the sake of human beings. So we're extremely fortunate, really, that God has persevered for so long. The highest qualities of human beings are spiritual and moral in nature. So we are essentially spiritual beings. We're here in a physical body temporarily, but ultimately we will go into the eternal heavenly or spiritual dimension. And also we talk about the family as the school of love. The family is the school of love. So we want to strengthen the family, the institution of the family. The family is where we learn true love. All the different aspects of love are found in the family. Parental love, conjugal love, children's love, brothers and sisters love. And that's the most important thing we learn in our life, is how to love correctly and truly. Cooperation beyond the boundaries of ethnicity, religion and nationality leads to lasting peace. So that is also very, very important. So that's the conclusion of this presentation. Thank you very much.